Another day, another trad wife. It's really funny because this topic is fascinating to me for several reasons. Number one, if you've ever been or ever known a traditional wife back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s, you would understand why people have so many issues with this so-called traditional wives of this era. Starting with the fact that if you're making money on your own, you're not a traditional wife. But we're going to leave that one for later. We have a new addition to this roster of interesting perspectives, for lack of a better word. And her name it's Kelly Diane. And so I'm going to read you the first time I saw what she said. Actually, I'm going to read the first one she ever, what I found. Let me put it to you this way. And then I'm going to read you a couple of other ones because I think it's fascinating what comes out of her Twitter. Feminists be like, quote, men get to live this privileged life while women are stuck doing all the work, end quote. Meanwhile, I can wake up whenever I want, have hot meals whenever I feel like eating, get to sip tea on my couch in the middle of the day, can go hiking or sightseeing whenever I feel like it, cuddle my kids and play board games with them, and have the freedom to take it easy if I'm ever sick without worrying about paid time off, and I don't even think about bills and raises and money, and I don't have the, quote, mental labor, end quote, of ensuring we're financially secure because that's not my contribution or responsibility. Marry a good man, and that I don't know how to say that word, patriarchal life starts to feel pretty privileged. For the woman, emoji, we're safe, loved, and protected over here, and pretty pampered too. Now, first of all, let me start from personal experience on both ends as a daughter and as a mother. I'm going to go back to when I was a daughter. 1966 all the way to 1987, which is when I left home. And yes, I left home because I got married. I did the tradition. It's really weird because I'm not a traditional person, but I ended up doing a lot of traditional things. Anyway, my mother, when I met my mother, when I became a part of my family, was a traditional mother. She wasn't always. When she first got married to my dad, they both worked. Then, well, let's just say my mother got pregnant right after she got married. So she worked the whole time that she was, as long as she could, because, back in those days, they gave you better leave. They paid you less, but they gave you better leave. And she then went ahead and left the baby in the care of family members while she went to work. Then a few years later, I want to say 4 years later. Yeah, 4 years later, no, 5. Well, technically 4 because my oldest brother was born in December and my second brother was born in April. So 4 and a couple months. She went ahead and had her second son. And due to an incident that I'm not going to repeat because I've said it in a couple videos, my father put his foot down and said, you know what, it's better for us, even if I have to work 2 jobs, which ended up being what he did. I'll work the 2 jobs or however many jobs I have to work, but it's better if you stay home and I take care of the bills. Now, I don't know what planet this young lady thinks that means that she doesn't have to concern herself with the bills. But I can tell you that my mother was very careful to not spend my father's whole paycheck at all. And she was very careful to be a contributing member of the conversation and not just sit there, spend his money, and be happy, okay? That was her responsibility. Going back to what she says about, wake up when I want to, what I want to, and it's hot meal and whatever, and hold on. I go hiking or sightseeing whenever I feel like it, blah, blah, blah. And keep in mind that I've seen this person's account, so I've seen other comments they've made about how they raise their children and whatnot. If you're really raising your children the way you're saying that you're raising your children, you do not wake up whenever you want. Your kids are going to wake you up fairly early because you have fairly young kids. you are going to have to spend the entire day taking care of said children unless you have a nanny, in which case you don't qualify for a traditional wife right off the bat. There is conversation here about the one that struck the most was the wake up whenever I want, but then after that she goes, have hot meals whenever I feel like eating. If you're lucky, you eat what's left over by your children. It's not always going to be a hot meal, because if you have children that are toddlers, you're probably feeding them or helping them eat. And even if they're a little older, you're going to have to help them eat. And that means that you're going to have to stop eating your food if you all serve yourselves at the same time. And, it's really funny because in another post, I don't know if I still have it, but if I have it, I'm going to post it here. She's talking about how, she's so organized and so perfect that she has everything under control and she can do all these things that she mentions on this post. I don't know what planet you're being realistic. You might have days when that happens, and as they get older, it's easier for you to have a certain structure in your life where your kids will do certain things at certain times. But when your babies are born, babies don't care about your clock. They don't care about your schedule. They don't care about your organization. Babies are going to do what they're going to do. And so you're selling this idea to people that your life is so perfect, when the reality is that doesn't start from jump. And I'm not even thinking about when babies get sick, because I can tell you from personal experience that my daughter, I would know 3 days before she got sick that she was getting sick, because she would go from sleeping through the night, because I was blessed with a child that slept through the night after the first week of being born. I can't complain about that part. She was really good about that. We figured out a trick to put her to sleep, and I'm not going to get into that now, but we figured out a trick where I could put her to sleep, and it was not a week, it was 3 weeks, I'm sorry. It was 21 days. We would do something, and she would go to sleep peacefully, no arguments, no like screaming baby or any of that stuff. We were very lucky that way. And she would sleep from 9 p.m. until 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So I was really lucky in that respect. However, if she was getting sick about 2 or 3 days before she started getting sick, she wouldn't sleep through the night. She would stay up until midnight and then wake me up every couple of hours. So that's not exactly what you're talking about, that you're free to do whatever you want, is it? And that happens with every child. Whether you get lucky like me and you had a 3-day head, warning, or you have kids that are actually sick. And by the way, if your kids start going to preschool or thanks to people being stupid, kindergarten and school, your kids will catch every freaking disease there is. They'll bring it home, and then they'll get better in a couple days, and you'll have it for a week. And then your husband will also have it for a week. So don't tell me that it's this paradise, because it isn't. Go hiking or sightseeing whenever I feel like it. If you have more than one, well, actually, no, I should not say that, because I had one child. Getting a kid to sit in the car, go sightseeing or whatever, is a project. I don't care how good your kids behave, it is a project. For one thing, kids need to be on seatbelts. If you're taking them on a bike or whatever, you put helmets on them and knee pads and elbow pads and the whole 9 yards. If you're riding, like I used to have a bike and I used to put my kid on the back and just go for a ride. That means this, what I just said. Helmet, even though she's not the one driving. Shoulder pads, elbow pads, and knee pads. If we were going out for whatever reason, you had to take your little baby bag with all your essentials. That baby bag eventually becomes a regular bag where you have to put all kinds of things to make sure that your kid has a snack, has a little water sip cup, or if they can drink like normal, they can have a water bottle. They have towels and sunblock and all the essentials. It's not just, oh, I'm going to go for a hike and grab your kid and go. That's not how it works. So please stop lying. Next. If I'm ever sick without worrying about paid time off and all this other stuff. If you're sick, none of your housework is going to get done. So all your organization is for nothing. Because again, unless you have a nanny who will take care of the 3 kids, you're going to have to take care of your 3 kids or 2 kids or 1 kid while you're sick. So, and I've seen the pictures because you're dumb enough to post pictures of your family on your Twitter. You have 3 kids. What are you thinking? Now, I will give you this. The last picture I saw of your family, and no, I'm not going to post any pictures of her family. I think that's, no. If she does it, she does it, but I'm not doing it. The 3 kids look like they're in school age already. So yeah, you can go and go doing all these things that you say you're doing because you have a couple of hours during the day when you can do it because they're at school. But that doesn't mean you don't have to get up at all dark 30 in the morning, because if you're such a good traditional wife, that means that you get up before your entire family does to start making breakfast and lunch boxes so they can take their lunches to school. Unless you're an 8-passenger kind of mom and you expect your children to make their own lunchbox, which is a stupid idea. Marry a good man, and that patriarchal life starts to feel pretty privileged for the woman. I don't want to bring race into this, but I am. Unless you have a certain status economically, meaning your husband makes a certain amount of money, this is not an option for anybody. So I'm not going to I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to. When you say stuff like marry a good man and that patriarch, I can't say that word, starts to feel pretty privileged for the woman, unless your husband makes a certain amount of income, that is not a possibility for most people. The average income in the United States of America is not past 30,000. It's either 30,000 or 35,000, something like that. In this United States right now, the average apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, is way over $1,800. You have 3 children, which guarantees that you have you can have 3 boys, in which case you could have 1 bedroom for all 3. But if you have any girls in that mix, that automatically means that you need 2 bedrooms for those children plus the 1 for you and your husband. So that's 3 bedrooms, guaranteed. 3-bedroom apartment here in the state of Florida, which used to be the cheapest state in the nation, by the way, at one point, but clearly not anymore, is around $2,400. Your husband, in order for you to live the lifestyle that you're talking about, would have to make at least $4,800 a month to be able to afford that. Not only that, but I'm saying 48 just based on the rent. I'm not even considering the fact that you do have 3 children, all school-age children, which means you spend a lot of money on your children if you want to keep them good. That doesn't mean you don't make clothes instead of buying clothes, or that you don't buy secondhand, or that one, as they grow, because they're not all the same age, the hand-me-downs and whatnot, it still means he needs to make a substantial income to support all 5 of you. And most people in the United States of America don't have that luxury. There's a reason why most kids, millennials and Gen Z, are having a very hard time getting a home without getting a roommate or something like that. It's because the incomes are not there. So for you to sit there and try to claim that, oh, if you marry a good man, I married a wonderful man. But you know what? Sometimes we need both incomes. Sometimes people can't finish college or can't go to college because they're too busy paying the bills. sometimes people best effort is not enough. So marrying a good man is not enough, ma'am. Just so you know. Anyway, I started looking at other things that she had posted, and she quote tweeted herself on that tweet that I just read for you and said, "Feminists can't believe I'm capable of doing all of these things and managing a household and raising kids because they've, one, not been trained in running a household efficiently because they're too career minded for that, and number two, they can't believe you can do enjoyable things with your children in tow. They think children are a hindrance from all things pleasant and are a burden, not companions to live life alongside you. Your children are not your companions." End of. Your children are your children. And again, I'm not going to go through everything I said in the beginning, but it applies to this too. You can have a well-oiled machine as your kids get older, but in the beginning, it doesn't work that way. Number two, the fact that a person doesn't want to have children or can have children has nothing to do with whether they're a feminist or not. Number three, the fact that somebody is a feminist doesn't mean that they don't have children of their own. Because I know plenty of people that consider themselves feminists, and I did for a very long time consider myself a feminist, and I had a kid. And you know why I don't have more? Because I miscarried all of them. So it wasn't even my choice. Okay? You sound very smug, and it's problematic because you're trying to teach other women how to be, and you being so proud of the fact that you have a well-oiled machine doesn't mean, number one, it doesn't mean that you do, and number two, it doesn't mean that it makes you better than anybody else. Now, one thing that I thought was funny was when she said, "Not being trained in running a household efficiently because they're too career-minded for that." And I can tell you from personal experience that everything I learned in college and in jobs helped me figure out how to organize my life better in order to be here for my daughter. So you're incorrect on that one too. But I just wanted to say that. So then she quote tweeted some other person called Patriarchy Hannah. See, I can say that one. And Patriarchy Hannah said, "If your husband is incapable of violence, you don't have a husband, you have a wife." This is not the first time we see a comment where somebody talks about, "Ooh, the man has to be capable of violence." And they're referring to the fact that if he's not capable of violence when somebody comes after you, okay? They're not talking about violence to hit you. The problem is that the man that is prone to violence is not going to tailor it to who is attacking who. He will, defend you from the big bad man in the store, but he will also defend himself from you. Just saying. So her answer to that one, when she quote tweeted it, is like, "Oh, B, she said the quiet part out loud. I don't think that means what you think it means." So then I went looking for the full comments to see what this Patriarchy Hannah was saying. And somebody said, "Why are people taking this wrong? I know my husband would never be violent towards me and our kids, but I do know that if anyone were to threaten or hurt me or the kids, my husband could be very violent. It makes our family feel safe. People live to take things wrong on this app." No, you said it. What's the word I'm looking for? You were vague enough for people to take it the wrong way. And that's exactly what you wanted, because that way you can go ahead and cry, "Oh my God, you're not understanding what I'm saying." As far as the other person who made the comment that, my husband can turn very violent, I've never felt unsafe with my husband. To give you an example, my husband has never been violent against anybody, but I am pretty sure that if at any point I was in any kind of danger, he would take very good care of me. We had we lived in Puerto Rico and now we live in Florida. We have very violent storms here. The one reason why I feel safe is because my husband has been allowed to stay home and be with us during those storms. Do I feel confident that if anything happened, I would probably be able to take care of it? Absolutely. Do I want to do that by myself? No. Do I feel safer knowing that all my people that I love are here? Absolutely. Does that mean that if he has to go to work on a particular day with a particular storm, I'm not going to feel confident that I can do things and take care of my people? Yeah, but it also means that I'm going to be worried about him the entire time he's out there. That's the only reason. So then, Patriarchy Hannah said, can we stop acting like most women are capable of working as hard as most men? Of course, my life as a stay at home mom is a lot of work, but also easier than my husband's life working outside the home. I'm his wife, not another man. He doesn't expect me to put in the labor he does. This is the most dismissive statement, and that's why I brought it up. I'm not necessarily talking about either one of these two people. I'm talking about the sentiments on the statements that they make. Because the idea that a woman doesn't work hard in the home when she's a stay-at-home mom is a lie. Technically, right now, even though I'm disabled, I'm a stay-at-home mom. There are days when I bust my entire behind, and my husband has had 5 meetings, and he's like in an office. Because my husband works in an office. Not everybody works out there in construction or anything like that. And mind you, construction pays really well, but not everybody works in construction. Not everybody's a truck driver that spends hours or days outside the home while you're at home. And either way, especially if one of your kids gets sick, your life is a complete train wreck for as long as those kids are sick. That doesn't mean that his job, whether it's physically it's physically harder, doesn't mean that your job is diminished because you think that it's not as hard. As someone who has done both, I can tell you that there were days when I was working outside the home when I wish I was a stay-at-home mom because they were really, really hard. And then when I was home, there were many times when I wished I was working somewhere because it would be a lot easier. These two are not mutually exclusive. So no, I'm not going to give you that one. So then we go back to, it's Kelly Diane who quote tweeted that tweet that I just mentioned and says, this is some of my own lingering toxic internalized feminism that I've had to learn to get over. I have higher standards for myself than my husband does, and he tells me I'm too hard on myself at home. He knows I'm the weaker vessel. I often forget. This is something that comes from being involved in organized religion. And yes, she's a Christian mom. And no, I don't care if you're Christian or not Christian. It's irrelevant. But there is something to be said for the Bible, a book that has 100 different versions and in English alone. And all 100 versions have different tweaks on different verses. Let's not forget that the Bible was written by hand at one point, so we don't know how many misdirections are there too. But it cracks me up because it always talks about the woman being weaker than the man, yet Maria. Well, you know what? I'm going to call her Maria because that's what we call it in Spanish. Maria was always with her son. She busted her butt to take care of her son the entire way until after he died. So don't tell me that women are weaker vessels. For one thing, the best example, according to your logic, the best example that I can give you that women are not necessarily weaker is the fact that we're the ones who give birth. If you've never watched the videos, they are hilarious, but go ahead and type in on your YouTube search, men having the machine for either the period cramps or the birth of a baby, and watch them squirm. And then tell me that we're weaker. Just because you think that a particular man is stronger than you are doesn't mean that all men are. I know plenty of men that are fairly weak. They cannot handle half of the stuff that women handle on a daily basis when it comes to raising their children or taking care of the household. I don't know if you've ever had to face a leaky plumbing system or a broken toilet or a stuffed up sink, or if you've had to deal with a little house, a grease fire, or I'm going for like the bad ones, or had to put together a piece of furniture. But if you're a real traditional housewife, because that's where I'm going with this, I'm not saying you can't be a traditional housewife if you don't want to. You can be a traditional housewife. What I'm saying is that the version of the traditional housewife that these women are selling you, the ones that are, I'm going to assume based on the picture and the age of the children, that she's a millennial. I might be wrong about that. But millennials and Gen Z have all these examples of traditional wives or traditional women who are so far removed from a traditional wife. Is scary. I don't know if it's because they lived in the city and not in rural America, but the rural traditional wife is as tough as they come, even tougher than her husband. She can think that she's a weaker vessel because she doesn't think she's as smart as her husband. I beg to differ. I've had people leave me comments on other videos about traditional women or traditional wives where they tell me every single thing that they have to do as a traditional wife or their mother had to do or whoever. And I can guarantee you this women wouldn't last a day being a traditional wife. I, in between years, had the honor of being a traditional wife in my house, raised by a very traditional mother. And let me go back to that for a second. My mother, after my second oldest brother was, I think he was a year. I don't think he was a year. He was almost a year, or maybe a year and a half. I don't know. He was not 2 years old yet. She became a traditional housewife. She never worked again. She didn't drive, so she never drove again. She stayed home, take care of the children, and because she didn't drive, if we needed to go anywhere, we had to take public transportation. She was an expert at public transportation. My mother could run the entire household, buy groceries, do everything using public transportation. My house was always spotless because my mother would take, and by the way, there's 4 children, which guarantees a minimum of 2 rooms. At sometimes, I'm trying to remember because as far as I can remember, it was always the boys and there was the biggest house we had was 3 bedrooms, but it was 2 stories high. 2 stories high. My mother had to clean all 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The living room, the dining room. What the hell? I hope you saw that because that was not an effect I did. And that's freaking me out. But my mother had to clean. My mother had to clean the entire house top to bottom. And I can tell you from personal experience, that takes the entire week. And then we would do it all over again on the weekend because as soon as we got home from school on Friday, all 4 of us had to take different jobs around the house. Eventually it was just the 2 girls, but we all cleaned the house between Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday nobody worked. We had a traditional household. It is nothing like what these girls are talking about. And as far as organized, my mother was disturbingly, maybe that's why I'm such a disaster, because my mother was one of the most organized people I've ever met. And they were not big. I shouldn't say it that way because half of this stuff is theirs. They didn't have a ton of stuff around the house. Like the living room was very sparse. The dining room was very sparse, but we had a wall of books because we had this big library and the background was all books. But my mother did not have a ton of stuff laying around. She fixed all our clothes because she had a sewing machine. She was amazing. She was I could have put her in any hotel to run the entire staff, and she would have been excellent. That's how good my mom was. But my mother, number one, did not have social media. Well, there was no social media then. But she didn't have any source of income. So all the income came from my dad, which means that at some points my dad had 3 jobs. Not one, not two, 3 jobs to be able to support his family. My mother at points was, you know, she never had the urge to go and get a job to help my father because my father made enough money. And of course, the last job that my dad had, which lasted the last 28 years of his career, my dad worked for IBM. And he made enough money that my mom didn't have to worry about anything. But my mom was also not accused of being a gold digger, because that's another thing that I've noticed. These men that want traditional wives will also accuse those women that want to be traditional wives of being gold diggers because they just want to sit around the house all day and eat bonbons. And it's because of women like this that make comments like these that they think that being a traditional wife is easy, and that the woman that wants that life, all she wants is to just stay at home and do nothing. You know, I got so excited with the balloons and the whole situation that I basically cut the video short, and I forgot one little thing. So now that I'm in editing, I can add it. And I don't like editing me. I just don't like that. So I'm going to tell you what I was thinking. One of the things that I didn't talk about in the entire situation was the fact that this person that chose violence, what does that solve other than getting your husband arrested? Because here's the thing. A person that really loves you and really wants to take care of you will not choose violence because there are other means to take care of you. For example, if somebody does you wrong, you get them arrested. And then you go to trial. You get the best lawyer possible to make sure that they protect your interests, and at the same time, make sure that the DA takes the case seriously. That's one thing. Another thing, if somebody cons you out of money or does anything like that to you, again, legal route is better than somebody just going and pummeling somebody. If somebody does something to hurt you in terms of physically, like beating you up or assault of any kind, and yes, I'm talking about that other type, but I can't say it here without getting demonetized, that is first to the doctor to get as much DNA as they can out of your injuries, and then to legal again. There is no reason why you need to end up, people always talk about stand your ground. Well, that works well for a very limited group of people. The rest of us are going to go to jail for that. It is what it is. And at the end of the day, do you really want to waste a year or two of your life going through motions and hearings and all this other things because your husband decided to use a gun or use his hands and kill somebody? Or do you want to do it the smart way? Violence, I remember when I was a kid, violence is not the answer. It isn't always. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I choose violence. But most of the time, I would have to say 95% of the time, you should not use violence. Anyway, back to the video. So I cannot wait to see what you have to say about this. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.